Hey, Wendy.
Hi, Krista.
How's it going?
Good. How about you?
Oh, pretty good. It's nice and sunny here in Seattle.
It's sunny down here too.
Oh, good. Let's see here. There we go. How did your bisque molds turn out if you worked on them?
I fired and I forgot to put it in the kiln.
Oh, nice. I did that too, actually. I was gonna fire my texture rollers too, and I forgot because they're so small.
Yeah.
Hey, Marion. All right, we have some people joining. Feel free to unmute yourselves while we're just getting, while we're just waiting for everyone to get here.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Nice.
I tried a couple extra bisque molds.
How'd it go?
Pretty good. Yeah, I'm making a chandelier, and so I needed something to can you see it? I know.
See here, view. Now I can see it if you turn your screen on.
Oh, how do I turn my screen on?
Yeah, mine's not doing that either.
Oh, I think it might not let you because of my settings.
Oh.
Let's see if I can change that. Let me allow everyone to talk though first. So feel free to unmute yourselves. We're just getting acquainted, waiting for everyone.
Hi, Krista.
Hi. I was thinking about actually doing a Zoom after the workshop, so we could share work, and it would just be like a regular Zoom, so I could see everyone. I thought that might be kind of fun. Maybe we could do that in a week if whoever wants to share work and maybe talk about any problems we ran into.
Yeah, sure.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm really curious about that chandelier. That sounds
Oh.
awesome.
Yeah. Really cute. It worked out really well.
Awesome.
But I still have to make the other side of it. Yeah.
Nice. I always get a little hung up on the installation because I have these really old light fixtures that I want to make some new light fixtures. But so if you have any like tips on installation.
Well, I had a presentation by a woman, and she ordered all the parts from Color Cord, and that's what I did. And it's way cheaper than like buying a light.
Yeah.
They're so expensive. So I just Color Cord. It's not the US. I think it's Denver.
Very cool. All right. We're getting a few more people in. Really excited about today's workshop. It's gonna kind of talk a little bit more about surface decoration after the first two demonstrations. And it's very approachable. It's actually how I kind of started working in my home studio because I didn't have room for like a glaze room or a glazed lab. And I was driving my pieces, greenware, and then bisqueware to a studio and to getting them fired. So it was, it's very approachable. We're going to learn how to make, I'm going to teach you how to make slip if you haven't done that. And there will be a little bit of feedback because a lot of us are unmuted. So if that gets a little annoying, just go ahead and mute yourself, but feel free to chat. If you have a question, let me know.
One question I have is, it does, with your molds, have you ever done it with cone 10 clays? Does it matter at all?
No, yeah, it wouldn't
Okay.
matter. You could do it with cone 10. I think you would just have to account for a little bit more shrinkage, but that would be great. Yeah.
Right.
That would be great. Here's my mold that I kind of cleaned up a little bit more from last week. I won't be working with it at all this week, but there was a question about how to kind of clean up this part down here. And I really just cleaned it up with, when it got leather hard with my Sureform, and just kind of, you know, scraped it. This is like my absolute favorite tool for just getting things nice and level, getting things nice and cleaned up. But you can kind of see, I also use the Sureform on the edges here to get that nice crisp line that will transfer over once you add that clay on there. So I'm thinking of making this into a vase, and also possibly a garlic keeper, doing some perforations in there and storing my garlic in there.
Would you put a bottom on it for the garlic, or just?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I would probably just kind of attach the clay, drape it over, and then put it on a slab and trace around it. And then just do that simple seam, simple horizontal seam, because gravity's on your side. Yeah.
And then an opening to put your hand in?
Yeah, and then probably that same lid that we that I showed you before, so you could take it off and clean the flowers if it were a vase, or you know,
Right.
or you could take it off to get your garlic out. All right, a few more people joined. Welcome. We have a few people that aren't able to make it today that let me know, but we're just gonna maybe wait 3 or 4 more minutes, and then I'll ask you all to unmute yourself or to mute yourselves, and we'll get started with the workshop.
It's on. Oh, it's not muted.
And just like last week, we're going to communicate through the chat box. So that's on the bottom of your screen. And you should be able to kind of move it around to wherever is good for you. And I'll just type hey in there and see if everyone can see that. And just one more thing to check too is at the bottom, once you open that chat box, you'll have a little to or send to at the bottom with a blue box. And just make sure that says panelists and attendees. So everyone's included, so everyone can see your questions. And that should work great.
Let's see where it has it.
Krista, how do you move that little chat box around? Because right now it's smack in the middle of your face and
Yeah.
screen.
If you want to just click on the top portion where it says chat and
Okay.
hold down, and you can kind of, so I have a MacBook and you can slide it over.
Great.
To the
Learn
right.
something new every day. Thank you.
Awesome.
Oh no, I don't want this.
There we go. All righty. 1 o'clock. Hope everyone's doing well. It's nice and sunny here in Seattle today.
Yay.
Yay. My garage is looking a little bare because I took down all my shelving behind me I'm getting ready to paint a mural back there, so I'm gonna
Nice.
prime the walls tonight or tomorrow morning. But right now it's really plain. All right, welcome, Sharon. We'll wait maybe one more minute and then get started. And just so we have a nice view for everyone to see, if everyone wants to just go ahead and mute themselves, and you can do that in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, and just click that little microphone and it should say unmute once you've hit mute. There'll be a little red line through it, and that'll give us nice sound throughout the workshop. Awesome. It looks like everyone did that. Got a few more people in. Welcome. All right. And just for the people that just joined, welcome. We're going to wait one more minute. Just like last week, we're going to use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to communicate. I encourage you to ask questions, related questions, unrelated questions, anything in clay. Did you make your earrings? Yes, I did. And I made these with a template too, so you can get a little bit closer. And then I just made a texture roller, or actually I used this texture roller here from the hardware store. It's just got little grooves in it. I love getting lost at the hardware store, seeing what I can find. So it's got those little grooves in it. I added some high heat wire once it's still soft to add that little loop there. But yeah, they're pretty fun. All right, so we have some fun things to do today. First, I'm going to show you how to make a plate mold. And I have a few of those here. So this is just a plaster mold. And if you're working from home and you're getting a little overwhelmed with your reclaim, this is a really good solution to making that. Is everyone seeing, how is the view? Am I on the big screen for everyone, or is everyone seeing a bunch of little boxes? And you can just respond in the chat box. Let's try that one. I see only you. Okay, big screen, perfect. All right, hopefully it's still the same. Okay, great. All right, so we're gonna start with a plate mold, and then I'm gonna show you how to hand build a cup with a template, which is also really nice because there's not a lot of waste. There's no trimming, so same with the plate. And then we're gonna finish off with a fun surface decoration using a newsprint transfer, which involves a little bit of underglaze, making your own slip. And you can get these really fun, colorful designs with kind of this like antique kind of vintage look. So it's a really fun process to do, especially if you don't have a glaze lab. So it's good for this new normal we're all getting used to. So let's just get started, and I'll show you these plate molds. And I just kind of want to talk a little bit about plaster. So this is the plate mold. Let me show you the actual plate. And this is the plate that comes off of it. So this one's dried already. And it's a really great method to making plates because you're not going to get overwhelmed with reclaim. You don't have to really trim your plate at all. So you don't have a lot of waste. They're great. This is a little bit smaller one because each plate is really uniform, just like working with a template. So they stack nice. they all have a nice weight to them. Like plates, when you throw them and trim them, it's really difficult to get that consistent weight. They're either like a little too heavy or a little too light. So great uniform plates. And it's just a little bit easier to handle all that waste. So in the email I sent you earlier today, I attached a link to kind of explain plaster. If you want to work with plaster, the safety precautions you should take, always wear a mask. It's just like dry clay dust. You don't want to be breathing it in. But also the specifics for how much water you want to use to how much plaster to use. So it just gets into the specifics of that. But you can really just kind of eyeball it. And that's kind of what I'm going to show you today. I'm not going to show you how to pour plaster because we don't have time for that, but I'll go through the steps. So to make this mold here, this is my large plate mold. It's got, you know, a nice plate curve that's going to be shown on all those plates. So to get started to make this, you're just going to throw a plate on the wheel and you're going to save a little bit of clay on the edge because you're going to be pouring plaster into it. So you're going to throw up a little wall, maybe just like this high. So when you pour the plaster in there, it's not going to come spilling out. My garage has like really unlevel flooring. So it's important to have that little extra bit of wiggle room. So you're going to throw your plate and get your desired curve. I encourage you to kind of throw maybe 2 or 3 small ones first and make them a little different, small variations to see what you like. And then once that plate sets up to leather hard, just throw it, let it set up to leather hard. You're gonna get like a bucket, and this is my plaster bucket. I use it for only plaster. You don't wanna contaminate any of your clay materials with plaster. Keep them separate as much as possible. So I'm gonna go to the store, get some pottery plaster number 1. I can get it at my local clay store. There's, I'm sure you can buy it online too. It's just a little bit heavy, so it would cost more in shipping. But to pour it in here, what you want to do is line this with a garbage bag, and that just makes the cleanup really easy. So you can just throw the garbage bag away when you're done. Anyway, so line it with a garbage bag, and you're gonna pour some water in here. If you're wondering how much water to pour in, go ahead and go to that link to see the proportions of plaster to water. But you know, for a plate this size, I pour probably about that much water in, about 70 degrees or room temperature. Sorry, that's Fahrenheit, not Celsius. I apologize. I should have prepared for that. So just grab some room temp water, and you want to put that in the bucket first. And then you can get a scoop, make sure to wear a mask, and you'll just begin scooping the plaster into the bucket. And then it'll just rush to the bottom. And then after a little bit, you'll start to see these little peaks form above the water. And once those peaks stay above the water for a few seconds, like 2 to 3 seconds, and they don't sink beneath the water, that's your sign that you have enough plaster in there. So then you can kind of mix. You can wear a glove, you can mix with a tool. I kind of just like using my hand because I don't like getting my tools covered in plaster. So I'll just put a glove on, mix it up, and you'll kind of begin to feel the plaster turn from like a milk to a heavy cream. And it'll set, it'll get warmer as it sets. So I just kind of mixed it for maybe a minute or two, let it chill for, literally chill, but let it just sit there for 3 to 5 minutes. And then I'm gonna get my leather hard plate that I just threw, yesterday or the day before, and slowly pour that plaster into that plate. And you have those nice walls on there, so you're gonna throw a little bit higher, or pour it in a little bit higher. And then you'll get this nice plaster mold. It will probably take about, I guess, a day to set up. Maybe check it at a half a day. And once it's hard, you can also, there might be some excess water that comes to the top. You can just take a sponge and get that off. But once this is hard enough, and you can just touch it and feel when it's will hold its shape, just begin to peel that leather hard clay, which is going to be very saturated with water. So it should be pretty easy to just peel off. And then you'll have this nice mold, which will be extremely fragile and take about a month to cure. I think I waited about 3 weeks for this one to cure. And I just have these old vents, and you could use anything that allows airflow, but I'll place my mold on here. And I usually just put it in my warmest room in the house, the laundry room, and let it dry for a month. And it really does take that long to get all the moisture out, but it's so worth it. I love using this method for plates. I don't have to worry about all that trimming and all that reclaim. So now that we have the mold, I'm going to show you how to start using it. So I have a system for my plates, which I've just dialed in over time. And so my small plate mold, see, they're a little different. My small plate mold, I take about 1 pound, 12 ounces of clay and roll that into a slab. My large plate mold takes about 2 pounds, 15 ounces. So that just gives me a starting point so I can have consistency within the weight and shape. So just be sure to mark all those numbers down. Try and stay organized that way. It'll free your head up it'll free your mental space for more important creative decisions. So I'm just gonna grab my slab that I have weighed out here. And I also just have an extra small wad of clay here, and this will be for the foot ring. But here's my wad of clay. And on new forms, if you're just testing this out, you can use your reclaim or any version of your cheaper clay. Can you give us the weight again? So this is 2 pounds, 15 ounces. And this plate mold here, I can measure it for you in centimeters. And then this plate is 27 centimeters wide. So it'll be a nice big dinner plate, probably about 23 centimeters when it's finished. So I'm gonna just roll this slab out. And I really want to kind of be conscious of keeping it in a circle so it can match this mold. I'm looking for a little bit of overhang that will trim off, but keeping it in a circle about just a little bit bigger than that mold. And we'll just begin to throw our slab out. And it's kind of an oval shape right now. So instead of throwing it like this and kind of having that direction like this, I'm gonna turn it perpendicular. So that motion is going to stretch the short side. And then flip it and throw it down, flip it. And it's pretty circular, so I can kind of go from any direction. And I hope everyone practice this. It's a great way to roll out slabs if you don't have a slab roller. It's quick. I think it's a lot easier than using a rolling pin, but I do use a rolling pin to help assist. So I'm just checking out my slab where I need to get it bigger. All right, and then grab your mold and just see where you're at. And I'm pretty good. I've got a little bit of overhang. My slab is at about, it's at about 1.5 centimeters. And I'm just going to, if I have any thick spots, I'm just gonna roll those out just a bit with my rolling pin. That feels pretty good. It's a little thick over here. I'm gonna roll it out. All right, and then I'm just gonna compress one side of it. So I just, when I compress, I just dip my rib in a little bit of water. How many inches? I think it would be probably like a 1/4 inch. Yep, a 1/4 inch slab, maybe just a hair thicker. And when you're working with these slabs, we are gonna trim it a hair on the wheel, which I'll show you later, but it's kind of nice to work a little bit thicker. My slab got a little oblong here, so it would normally be a little bit thicker, but having a thicker slab on your mold will help you from prevent from warping. So work a little bit thicker, and I can show you to make some small adjustments, trimming at leather hard. All right, so I'm gonna compress this in all directions. And I just dipped it in a little bit of water so it wouldn't have so much friction. All right, and so the side that we just compressed, I'm gonna go ahead and put that on my mold, face down. Let me get it over here. And just get it on top of your mold best you can. It's a little short here. Sorry about that noise. Okay. And then this is really nice to work on a banding wheel. So you can really just cut out, if there's a lot of excess on one side, just go ahead and trim that off. And then I like to do this first part on a banding wheel. And this side is the side we haven't compressed yet. So I'm just gonna slowly start turning it and compress it to the mold. Just getting rid of all those creases, making it nice and strong. All right. So now we have our clay compressed onto the slab. If your mold is the same size or a little bit bigger than your banding wheel, it's kind of nice because you can just use one of these cheese graters. I actually got this from Sunshine Cobb, which I added in the last link to 2 weeks ago, that workshop. But this is so great for hand building. And you just bring it to the side of the mold and begin to trim it off. And this clay is fresh. It can go straight back into your bag, wedge it up, put it back into your bag. And you can use that later. All right, so now we kind of have the beginning of the plate. I'll just go around and compress those edges that I see, maybe that weren't compressed. All right. That looks great. Now I'm gonna take it over to the wheel and we're gonna attach a foot. If you don't have a wheel at home, you could definitely do this on your banding wheel. I just kind of want to give you the information for those of you who do have a wheel or if you'll have one in the future. Makes it a little bit easier, but definitely you can do it without a wheel. You would just do it all by hand and you could have those really lovely fingerprints or whatever mark you want to leave on your pot. So here's my wheel. I just have a standing wheel and a Shimpo light. And to make it a standing wheel, which is really great for your back, I just have a lot of lower back pain if I throw sitting down. So I just got some cinder blocks at the local hardwood store to raise my wheel, and then some smaller bricks to kind of dial in the height. But any work table that you have or your wheel, you kind of want it at belly button height, so it feels good on your back. Just got a little bit of clay in there. So I'm gonna grab a tool. I'm just mainly gonna use this multi-pronged needle. And if you didn't have this tool, you could just use your needle tool as well. Any pin tool will work just fine. So first I'm just going to center my mold onto the wheel. Let me show you this great foam bat first. So I just made this, it's on a bat, and I got some foam at the craft store, and I just drew in the concentric circles here to help with centering. But if you don't have a foam bat, it makes your life a lot easier. It's great for trimming plates. It's great for trimming objects that are kind of low down. What is the depth of the side of the plate you cut with the wire? What is the depth? I'm not sure I understand that question. What is the depth? I kind of just followed the edge of the mold, and then we can trim it some more on the wheel here. But you can experiment with.
Just on the flat side.
What was that?
Just on the flat side. What is the height of the flat side on the side? Is that 3/8 or does it matter?
Okay. So like right here?
Down, right from the bottom to where the curve's in. That flat piece.
I would say it's.
Does that matter?
I don't think it matters, but it's about 1 centimeter or 1/2 inch. Yeah. I hope I'm understanding that question correctly. Feel free to ask it again if I'm not.
It's
yeah.
just where from the bottom to where your sharp edge is.
So this right here?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's about 1/2 inch, 3/8 of an inch. Yeah. Or one centimeter. Let's see. Yeah, 1 centimeter. And that was just kind of the natural curve of cutting it off. But you'll kind of get your own rhythm. And if you use a needle tool, you can even dial it in even more. And while the wheel's going, and trim it up to here. You could even trim it in here if you wanted to make a tiny dessert plate or a saucer. So you have a lot of freedom with this mold. This mold can make you various plates. And if I were to say critique my own mold, I would probably make it with a little bit more of a slope here. It's a little bit flat in the center, and that's going to it's going to encourage some warping. So a flat plate is going to really want to warp in the kiln, but if you have a nice consistent slope, it's going to want to keep its shape in the firing. So if I were to critique my own mold, that's what I would do different next time. All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and center this. Turn my wheel on just slowly. It's pretty centered. All right, and I have it centered. And so you can grab your calipers, and I have a measurement for the inside of my plates, and I think it's about 5.5 inches. So, and that's just so every plate is uniform. So I'll take my ruler and go to 5.5 inches, which is about 14 centimeters. And I'll take my multi-pronged pin tool, turn the wheel on, and just slowly start to mark where that foot ring is gonna go. And so I would say I have, you know, about 2 inches on the outside. You don't wanna have the foot ring so far in the center because then your sides are gonna slope. Depending on how hot you're, how hot you fire to. I fired to cone 6 electric. And so I often get some warping in my plates. So I'm gonna put that about, you know, 2/3 of the way towards the outside. And then you're gonna take your extra wad of clay and just roll a coil. So just like we were hand building last week. I can kind of swing us over here. And it doesn't have to be a perfect coil, but you kind of want it uniform. So that trick I showed you last week, sorry, this keeps turning. That trick I showed you last week of twisting it to get it more even will come in really handy. And you're just gonna twist. Maybe I'll twist it again to get it really uniform. The more uniform you have, a little bit easier it will be to get it super uniform on the plate. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm just gonna cut it off. I apologize for that. I'm not sure how to turn off that sound. All right, so I have my coil. It's pretty generous. I like to work with a bit more clay than maybe you would expect because you can always trim some off, which I'll show you in just a sec. I'm just gonna go ahead and place that on those scores that I created. And I'm not gonna apply much pressure down. I just want it to float because we're actually gonna flip it. And then I'm gonna make that kind of lock and key system, or those 2 little mouths. And they'll just feed right into each other and make a nice, strong connection. All right, and then grab your scoring tool again, that multi-prong tool. Turn the wheel on lightly and just score the top of that. And you're kind of evening out any discrepancies in height and scoring it for a nice attachment. I'm gonna add a little bit of water. It's not super crucial because the clay on the mold is the same clay, the same wetness as the foot ring. So just add a little bit of water. We have it nice and scored. So now I'm just gonna flip it over and join those 2 together. And then I just kind of take it slow and slowly pinch it so that this coil is matching up. Approximately how thick is the coil? It looks about almost a full inch. Oh no, 3/4 of an inch. So I would say it's like the thickness of my thumb, maybe even a little thicker, but just shy of an inch. And depending on how tall you want this foot, you can really play around, but I like to err on the side of too much clay because you can always take some away, but it's a little bit harder to add clay once you already have it on there. So I'm just lining up the outside of the coil to the outside of my score marks. And I'm using a pinching motion. I'm compressing it together and also down to get that nice connection point. And we can really press as much as you want on it here because this plaster mold, that's the beauty of this mold. While we're working, it's drying the bottom side of our plate at the same time because the plaster is sucking up all the moisture from the clay. So it will actually dry really evenly, which is really the hardest, I would say the hardest thing to accomplish with plates is flipping them and you know, really monitoring that drying process. So now I have the beginning of the compressions for the foot ring. I'm just gonna turn it on, turn my wheel on mildly fast, or slow, sorry. And I'm gonna add just a hair of water and begin to let my fingers run through that foot ring. And I'm starting with a little bit of pressure and really adding some as I go. I'm also pushing down with my moist sponge. So I'm compressing down and squeezing together with my left thumb and pointer finger. And we're just compressing this down to our plate. And so you can see we have a really big foot. What's kind of nice about this too, you know, we can trim this off, but this plate is going to be hand built, but it's going to have a lot of those nice wheel thrown qualities. Once again, if you don't have a wheel, you can definitely do this on a banding wheel. Yeah, you could definitely do, instead of plaster, could you make the mold out of clay and biscuit? That's a great question. You could definitely make a bisque mold. For my, like whatever works well in your mind. In my mind, I wanted to get the reverse of the image. So I wanted to throw a plate and get that mold. So to make that for a bisque mold, you might have to throw a closed form, which might be a little bit more difficult for beginners. But if you have that within your wheelhouse, definitely do that. You could also hand build it out of coils and then just use your sure form and get that nice slope. But you could definitely make it out of clay and use a bisque mold. It just kind of makes more sense in my mind to pour something into that to get that nice slope. But whatever makes sense to you. So I'm just gonna start to gently throw the ring up. And I'm gonna begin to get rid of this because I have a little bit too much excess clay here. So this can go straight back into my bag. It's great fresh clay. So far we have 0 waste on this plate, which is awesome. Keeping up with reclaim is a full-time job. So I love these molds because they create less waste and they create a same kind of feeling throughout your work. So just gonna go ahead and recompress or compress that foot again. And I can grab my other plate that I made and kind of see how thick that or how tall that foot is. So this one's still a bit bigger. So I'm making this for a set. So I'm gonna trim down that foot a little bit more. Really compressing with my fingers where the foot meets the inside and the outside of the mold. But once again, these are the same wetness of clays, so they should marry pretty nicely. That clay can go right back in my bag too. And another advantage with this style is you don't have to worry about trimming a plate and possibly trimming through and, you know, kind of maybe messing up the other side of the plate. It's just so nice you have that mold there to compress, which is really important with plates. So I'm just gonna go ahead and compress that middle, compress that section where it meets the foot ring. I'm gonna do the same on the outside. I'm gonna go ahead and compress that section right there. That looks pretty good. My foot maybe still is a little too large. I'm gonna match it to this one again. So your first plate, I just keep it close and keep it as my like pilot plate. That feels pretty good. I'm gonna take off just a hair more. But this nice tall foot too gives you the freedom to glaze the bottom of your plate generously, and you know, gives you really fun palette to design on, which I struggled with as a beginning potter with plates, glazing the bottom of them because my feet were never tall enough, and it was always a struggle. So just a fun new process for making plates. All right, the last thing I want to do is grab my rib and just kind of lay it down and compress the bottom there and make sure that's a nice flat surface so it will sit on the table nicely. And then I just take my sponge in a little water. I re-wet all those areas I just went over. Like most of my work, the finishing stages, I sponge it and then take a rib. I'm gonna use my soft red rubber rib for this last one and just get rid of those sponge marks and compress. Compressing all over the plate. All right, so the rest of the finishing work for this plate, you know, you could clean up the edge there a little bit. This angle right here, you can really kind of define how you want it, and you'll see more once we flip the plate over. But I might just double check one last measurement here. And so this plate is a little bit larger. I'll account for just a hair of shrinkage as it goes from wet clay to a bone dry clay. So I'll turn that on, and on this part, I'll just use my pin tool, turn the wheel down a hair, and I'll just slide it into the mold. And once I hit the mold, I'll kind of back off, and I'm just gonna trim and get that nice beveled angle, which you can see here on the plate. So I'm gonna enter kind of, you know, at an angle, but you can experiment with different lips on your plate. I'm gonna turn the wheel down just a hair more. I hit the mold, so I'm gonna back off, turn the wheel off, and just get rid of that last bit of clay. So whoever asked previously how much clay is down here, I would say there's probably close to a whole inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch, or about 2 centimeters. And then the last thing I'll do before I let this sit is just grab my sponge and soften that edge. I don't like to have any like harsh edges on my pottery. Same with the foot here, nice rounded edges, less likely to chip, less likely to break in the sink. And so this plate is ready to set. So I'll just keep it on the plaster mold for about 6 to 7 hours. If that doesn't really work with your process, you can keep it on the plaster mold. Say you want to work on it tomorrow. I would just cover it in plastic, keep it on the mold, cover it in plastic maybe in 2 hours, and let it sit overnight. And that's the beauty of the plaster. It's going to do this amazing even dry for you. And then tomorrow you can take it off. So to take it off, which I'm not going to do right now because it's still very wet, but just be sure to sandwich it and then flip it like that. Never grab your plate like this off the mold. It's gonna remember that and warp, maybe not in the bisque firing, but definitely in the glaze. it'll remember that. So always sandwich when you can. And I'd like to show you the next section. One more thing about these molds too is if you can make like 4 of them, that gives you a really nice workflow, because this is going to be on here for a few hours. So definitely something to think about. You can make like 1 every day. But if you want to work a little bit faster than that, maybe thinking about making a few of these. All right, so I'm gonna have to trash that plate, unfortunately, to show you how to trim it, but that's okay. It was just reclaimed clay. So I have a plate that's I made yesterday. I took it off the plaster mold after about 7 hours, sandwiched it and put it on a bat to dry right side up. So here's my plate. It's leather hard, and I'm gonna do some finishing on the wheel. So once again, you could do this on a banding wheel too, if you if hand building, if you don't have a wheel, or if hand building is more your style. So just gonna center this on here. And I just kind of use a tap center. All right, that feels pretty good. I'm gonna take my leather hard plate, turn it over, and place it on the mold. And just wanna make sure that's centered. So right now we're just gonna be doing some finishing. And what I like to do is just kind of trim and define these nice edges on the outside, make them a little bit lighter. You can also trim inside here for a glaze line or a wax line, which can really increase your efficiency for waxing and glazing later on in the process. So just center it on here. All right, so that's centered. So the plaster is not, or the plate's not as saturated as it was yesterday. So you just kind of want to be mindful of trimming. You want to keep both hands on the wheel. Maybe I'll trim right here so you can all see it. So my 2 hands are anchored together, kind of like a butterfly. My thumbs are butterflied. I'm gonna work a little bit slower. Usually I trim at a pretty fast speed to get a nice consistent look. But just be mindful that this might move around a little bit on the plaster mold. So be conscious of that and kind of work with those changes as you see them. So I'm just going to kind of keep this section right near the foot a little bit thicker and thin out that lip. the same as you would as you were kind of like tapering the lip of a mug or a cup. Make it nice and elegant, and gives it a nice kind of visual weight. The visual weight is going to be tapered, and it's going to look a little bit lighter, and it's going to kind of lift off the table. So I'm always thinking about that visual weight. If my slab is a 1/4 inch thick and it's tapered to an eighth inch thick on the edge here, you know, it's going to appear as if it was an 1/8 inch thick all over. So just something to think about. And I'm going to also just add, you can trim in here as much as you want. I really don't trim too much because this slab is already kind of the thickness I want it. But I do like to add a little bit of a glaze line in here. And so this will give me a line where after the bisque, when I sand and wax, I can wax, and the wax will kind of pool on that line and make it a really crisp line. So incorporating these little elements, these lines for glaze runoff or for wax can really tighten up your design process for glazing. Any challenges with plate not fully fitting contour a mold while it was drying, shrinking a little while off the mold? No, not really, because my molds are so gently tapered or sloped, and kind of the nature of a plate, they really fit back on there really nicely. And because they're drying on there for about 6 to 7 hours, they're going to remember that shape. But you shouldn't have any problems with that. But if you do, feel free to email me. If you're doing like a much more elaborate shape, I imagine you might run into that, but there's not a whole lot of shrinking from wet clay to bone dry. Not as much as from wet clay to a finished glaze piece, which is about 11 to 13% for the clay I'm using, which is a New Zealand porcelain. Probably has a much more higher shrinkage rate than like a stoneware or something, and I haven't run into that problem yet. All right, so I have my glaze lines. I've tapered the edge there, and I'm happy with that. And I'm just gonna go ahead and take my sponge and really soften those edges one more time. All right. That feels pretty good. And then the last thing I do so you can sandwich it, pick the mold off, and take your mold out. And there's just a little bit of cleanup to do around the edge, and you can do that with a sponge. You can do that with a Sureform. I just have a little bit of cleanup to do right here. And that's about it. And then I'm just gonna soften those edges. And I'll probably leave this under plastic for a day, maybe 2, and then uncover it to dry completely. But once again, just slowly dry your plates, softening those harsh edges. All right, and that's how you make a plate. You really don't have to do any finishing work on here. You compressed it before you put it on the plate mold, and that should be enough. And so I'm just gonna let it dry right side up, cover it in plastic. If you can get plastic at the dry cleaners, they have really nice soft plastic. I don't know why it's so much better than any other plastic, but here in the States, it's really nice. All right, so we're gonna move on to a slab built cup next. Kind of the reason why I wanted to start making slab built cups primarily is because when you have a tall tumbler, it's a little bit difficult to trim on the wheel. Of course, you could use a chuck, so just a thrown object you can put your cup in upside down, usually just thrown to a bisque, similar to a bisque mold. But I don't really like that process either. So here's some cups I made yesterday, and these have the newsprint transfer on them. And just a nice tall tumbler, kind of a truncated cone. So it's slightly smaller on the bottom, slightly wider on the top. So this is the cup I'm going to show you how to make today, including these fun transfers, which give you this nice antique kind of look too. So where the transfer kind of pulls away, you get these nice organic, I just love them, kind of shapes. You can kind of see it on here too. This transfer was a little bit small, so just make it, I need to make it a little bit bigger, but I kind of like that resting spot too. So let's begin with that. So if you've, once you removed plastic to finish drying, do you ever need to cover rims so it doesn't dry too quickly compared to rest of the plate? You could, depending on the atmosphere in your studio. If you have like heat blasting all the time, I would definitely monitor and make sure your plate is drying evenly. But because of the nature of this plate, it's essentially all the same thickness. And you're not going to have any discrepancies in thickness. And so your plate is going to dry pretty evenly. But if you do notice that, I cover your edges in plastic, but I don't do that. I just keep it all under plastic for a day or two, and then take the plastic off and let it dry. But a slow process for sure. My studio, the heat's only on when I'm working in here too. So if my heat's blasting in here, I have a really old heating system. I keep all my pieces covered if the heat's on. But when the heat's off, I keep most things uncovered. So this is the template we're going to use for the slab cup. And if you're wondering how to get to this shape, if you actually just like take a coffee cup from your favorite coffee shop, or like a paper cup, and cut it down the side and then cut that circle ring out on the bottom, it'll give you this shape. And it's a truncated cone. And since it's truncated, you're going to have these kind of swoops. So it's not going to be directly straight across like it would if it were a perfect up and down cylinder. I kind of wanted a taller tumbler, so I experimented with a few different sizes, and I found this one was kind of my favorite. I think it'll turn out to be like a 12 to 14 ounce cup once it's finished. So when I'm experimenting, I just use newsprint, and then when I'm ready to transfer it onto cardstock, or even craft foam is great. You can even write on here like 12 to 14 ounce tumbler, and keep that for your records so you can find it easily. But this is the template I'm going to be working with today. And the first thing I'm going to do is roll out a slab. And I don't have a slab roller here, so I'll just show you again. It's just such great practice. So I'm just going to use probably about 2 pounds of clay. And I kind of like to work in series, definitely with this method. So I'll make 6 to 10 cups at a time, and it gives me a really nice break in between each cup. So the first one can dry, and then once I'm on the last one, you know, the first one's ready to go into the next stage. And I'll kind of talk about that some more in a moment. So just being mindful that you kind of want your slab to be a little bit longer than it is tall. So just going to begin to throw it at a diagonal. Sorry, I have some stuff on the table and it's kind of rattling. Did anyone try rolling out a slab like this, or did they have any success with it? It might take a while to get used to, but it's definitely worth it. See that loud sound? Kind of want to avoid that. That means it just hit straight on the table and didn't really slide and compress. All right, so I really like my cups pretty thin. They're gonna have a lot of liquid in there, same with like a pitcher or another vessel that's gonna carry a lot inside. You wanna think about having something nice and uniform and not so heavy that when it's filled with water or any other liquid that it's gonna be hard to lift up to your mouth. All right, so I have my slab here. I'm just gonna take my template. Yes, works great. Awesome, Miriam. Yeah, once again, that was one of the first things I learned with my mentor, and I was just wondering why I didn't learn it so much sooner. It's a great little technique to have. And then just to copy this template, just run your finger around the perimeter, and that will give you a nice line. And if I was working in a series of 6 to 10, I would have a little bit bigger of a slab, probably 2 to 3, and I would try and orient this on here so I can get as many cups as possible. Work on to my next one and work in an assembly line. So I'm cutting out, I'm tracing and then cutting out all the slabs. And I'm kind of working smarter. So doing like one of these at a time is pretty time consuming, but if you do, 6 or 10, you really get into a rhythm. And then I'm just gonna cut that out along that crisp line that's on the inside. And I'm just using an X-Acto knife. It works pretty well. And I'm just gonna remove that excess clay. I have a slab that's been sitting for an hour because for me, that's the perfect consistency. But if you're working, keep these slabs for the bottom, this excess, so it'll be the bottom of the cup. So just, set those aside. And any other excess, like that's not enough to go on the bottom, just roll back up, fresh clay, goes back in the bag. So there's your slab. I wouldn't ever pick it up like this, but I just wanted to show you. I work on MDO board. It's a really nice particle board that kind of sucks the moisture out. A lot of other ceramic artists use finish their tables with cement board or dry plaster board, which suck even more moisture out. So all great surfaces to have on your table. So let this sit for an hour. I try not to move it at all. And you can kind of gauge when you want to work with it, but I found that after an hour, it's still pretty soft. So I'll show you the one I have over here. Still very bendable, but it kind of has a little bit more structure. So this is when I like to work with it. The tools I'm going to be using are a pony roller. I recommend one of these for hand building. Mine is from printmaking, so it's made of rubber, but I wish I kind of had a wooden one. Wooden ones work really well too. But any kind of roller you have. So I'm just gonna go ahead and address the edges here, and I'm gonna create, which is a little bit hard to see, but kind of the same design on my mugs. I'm gonna create this nice little bevel or nice inviting tapered lip. Let me grab a mug and you can kind of see that too. So I kind of want some of these elements to match my mugs. So here's my wheel thrown mug, and you can see that same element. So, you know, these two pieces of work are made completely different, but they kind of have that unifying element. Same here, it has that nice tapered lip that I'm aiming for. So just grab the pony roller, or if you don't have a pony roller, you can just use your finger, maybe with a little water. And I'm just going to start to roll it in a long, even stroke. I'm not going to do little strokes like this because those are going to trace, or they're going to show up on here. So I want a really nice even stroke, and I'm kind of rolling with that taper in mind. All right, and now like we talked about 2 weeks ago, we want to bevel these edges because it's going to be a horizontal seam. So we're going to want to use the X-Acto knife, hold it at a 45-degree angle, and just bevel that edge. Then gently grab your slab, flip it over, and working on the same side, bevel that opposite edge. Holding it at a 45-degree angle. All right. Now you can kind of see that beveled edge. And I'm going to flip it back over so my tapered lip is on the inside. And slip and score. If you have some leftover trimmings from the wheel, just soak those in water, and that'll make some great slip. And when you're scoring, if you can go in 2 directions, it makes it a bit stronger. So I'm going to go vertical and then horizontal. So kind of like a cross hatching. All right, I'm going to add slip to one side. And there's not much, it's mostly water, which will be fine. Kind of rescore that if the water kind of gets rid of all those lines. Rescore. Got a little bit of a finger mark there, so I'm just going to roll it once more. All right, now I'm just going to bring the cup together and just slowly try and do it so you can see. I kind of attach the top first, and don't be worried about all the warping that's going on right now. We will fix that. Here we go, I'll do it like this. So just lightly attaching it, nothing is set in stone. If you're not used to hand building, this will take a while to get used to, but just stick with it. All right, now I'm going to add a little bit more pressure and equal and opposite force. So whatever pressure I'm adding in the front here, I want it in the back. Otherwise, your cup's going to kind of not turn out so straight right here. So whatever tool you have, a nice wooden stick works well. I'm just going to place that right on the back side there. And just begin to compress that seam. And I'm adding, a generous amount of pressure there. And another decision to make here is, do you want to keep that seam? Do you want to accentuate that seam? Do you want to diminish it? All personal aesthetic, whatever you really like, but it's kind of fun. I have thrown most of my work, so I kind of like to embrace these sweet little details of hand building. So I like to leave the seam on the outside and clean up the seam on the inside. So just go ahead and drag your wooden stick up and down there. Let's see here. You can get a sponge. I don't like to add a whole lot of water, but just lightly sponge there. You can also use your pony roller and roll to compress. And that kind of gives you a nice contour and kind of eliminates the lumpiness of compressing it with your fingers. So I'm pretty happy with that. I really like the organic nature of that seam. It echoes the kind of antique quality from the newsprint transfer. But if you didn't like that, just go ahead and, take a tool this is like a little rubber squeegee, a little rubber point, and you could just clean that up a little. And you could accentuate that, but really focusing on compressing. And I'm gonna now focus on the inside. And I'm gonna take, this is just an old oil painting brush with stiff bristles. It's nice and long, so it helps me with these taller forms. But I'm just gonna go in there and with a little bit of water, just go up and down that seam. And then I'm just gonna take my wooden stick and compress that even more. And I'm gonna hold my hand right here for like an opposing force on the outside. So I'm compressing into my hand. And I'm trying to eliminate that seam on the inside. I think it's kind of nice for cleaning to have that seam cleaned up, but whatever you're into, it's, embrace these details or get rid of them, whatever you want to do. And really make sure that connection at the top, really squeeze that together, compress. You can flip it over. I don't really enjoy putting my cups on the table because I noticed it gives them a little bit of an indent on this nice tapered lip. So I try to avoid that at all costs. You could get your foam bat and put your foam bat down, or just even a big sponge you have laying around. So just being really gentle, and I'm just gonna work that seam on the bottom there. I can get a little more pressure when I flip it over. All right, and then sometimes when you compress it, you get a little excess and it's not gonna sit exactly straight. So just get rid of that there. And I'm gonna take my paintbrush and just brush until that looks nice and clean and even. All right, I'm pretty happy with this. You can see it's a little out of the round. So if you don't have maybe something like this. This is just a cup that I have laying around, and I use it to true up the top and bottom, and it works really well because it's also, you know, a truncated cone. So it gives you the freedom to work with tiny openings or much larger ones. If you didn't have something like this, you could throw something like this and just fire it to a bisque. So throw a closed form, maybe like that. You know, it doesn't even have to be closed. And you could use that for truing up your surfaces. So what I mean by that is just taking your cup or whatever you have to get in there to kind of true this up. And twist it and push down. And then you have a nice circle. And then I flip it upside down. And I'm going to true up the bottom, just seeing if it's level. And then kind of twisting and releasing. And if you find that your cup is sticking to this, if you're using glass, just go ahead and sprinkle some cornstarch on it. This is also great if you're working with lids or anything that needs to dry together. Just sprinkle some cornstarch on there and your pieces will not stick. The clay won't be so sticky. So see how nice and gentle that comes out now. And that'll just fire away. You don't need to worry about cleaning that up. But grab a box of cornstarch and keep it in your studio. It's a great resource to have while hand building. All right, so we have our mug, our tumbler. Now we just need to attach the bottom. So here's another slab that I have saved. It's been sitting for an hour. It still bends a little. It's compressed on both sides. And I'm just going to place my cup. I'm going to true it up one more time on the bottom. Place it on there. And then I'm just going to trace it with whatever I have. My wooden tool works fine. And just lightly trace around. And once you get really dialed in with this process, you can, instead of tracing it, you know it's like 2 inches. You could order a cookie cutter from the last link I sent you 2 weeks ago and just have that, and you could cut it out really fast and easy like that. I haven't dialed this in completely yet, but I'm thinking of doing that to make this really a flawless, efficient process. And then I'm just cutting it out. I'm not worrying about beveling the edge yet. All right, so we have the base of our cup. I'm gonna take my pony roller. Clean this up a little. And just sort of bevel or soften that edge there. I'm just getting rid of that harsh edge. All right, I'm gonna flip it, slip and score. And add just a tiny bit of water. I'm gonna slip and score the bottom of my tumbler pretty generously in multiple directions. And I'm really gonna true this cup up through multiple stages of the process. So I'm truing it up to get my nice circle here. I'm gonna true it up right before I put it on here. And then once again, When it's leather hard, I'll true it up some more, and that'll give me a nice circle. All right, that looks pretty on there. And now I'm just gonna kind of push lightly down and begin to kind of roll those edges up. I just want it to, then you can kind of roll it like this. I just want it to stick initially. And then I'm gonna grab my sponge or my nice working surface and take my roller, and I'm just rolling down. So I'm just attaching it to the cylinder. I'm not worrying about anything else right now. Gotta clean that off a little. All right, so now that it's attached to my cylinder, I'm gonna start to roll these edges over. And you can experiment with leaving a little bit more clay on the edges and having it kind of wrap down. And that can be a really interesting point in your piece to draw interest, kind of have a little decoration there. But I'm just gonna slowly start to roll it over the edge. I don't want too much of a busy foot, because my transfer is going to be the focus of my design. So just rolling it over gently, going around a few times. And then you got it on a little bit more. You don't have to worry too much about cleaning it up perfectly. Like most things, at least in my ceramic practice, I really do that finishing cleaning when it's leather hard. You can really drive yourself crazy trying to get it perfect when it's in this wet green stage. So leather hard green, really easy to clean up, but I do want to make sure that's compressed. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna fast forward one moment here and just apply some slip. So this is my transfer, which I'll talk about in a moment. I'm gonna apply the slip right now because it needs about a half an hour to set up. And then I'll kind of work backwards and tell you what I did. So I'm just gonna grab my slip. This is just a slip I made with a mason stain. I believe it was a peacock was the color. So my slip is kind of on the thicker side. It's like a nice thick cream, almost turning into butter. It could probably be a little thinner than this. I'll just add a little bit of water. All right, so we have that nice thick consistency. I have a nice brush that I can load a lot of slip onto, and I'm just gonna go ahead and apply a generous amount of slip over the entire newsprint transfer. And this will make a lot more sense in half an hour once I show you this process. But I need to get this to dry, so I'm gonna apply the slip. And if it starts to buckle at all, I'm going to pull it tight, and I'm gonna let it dry right up here. And I'm gonna pull it tight and just let it dry. Clean this off. All right, so we have our cup. Once I get the bottom on, I like to take that stiff paintbrush and get it a little wet and really get in at the bottom, because we need to compress compress that bottom seam where the foot meets the bottom of the cylinder. So I just get a little bit of water and I rub those stiff bristles over and over and really compress that inside. And I will come back probably right before I'm gonna apply my transfer. So when this can hold its shape, probably let it sit covered for a day, or whatever works well in your process of making. You could leave it uncovered maybe for an hour or a few hours, and then it will be a nice leather hard to apply the transfer on, and then you could compress the inside again. But I do like to go on the inside twice. If you're a little bit nervous about that seam down there, you could roll a coil and add a coil down there. But I find that a double go over of these compressions works really well. All right, so my cup is pretty much done. I'm just going to finish it off by truing up that top there. And I'm going to cover this in plastic. And then tomorrow I'll probably come back to it and apply the transfer. If you're working in stages, I would just move on to my next cup and do that. But so there's the hand-built tumbler. All right, so here's a tumbler that I made, I think a few days ago. It's been in plastic for a few days. So, you know, it's holding its shape. I can go ahead and clean this area up down here. You can just take a Sureform and kind of get rid of that excess. And if it's coming off like Parmesan cheese, that's when you know it's the perfect stage. If it's getting caught in there, it's a little bit too wet to be using this. And then I'll just kind of soften that edge on the bottom there. And also use Scotch-Brite, that scouring pad. You can get at the grocery store or the Home Depot or whatever hardware store. Get rid of those marks from the Sureform. Also one of my favorite tools, so wonderful for hand building and just finishing work in general. All right, now I have a nice clean finish down there. I don't want something super busy because that's really gonna come from my transfer. So once you have a leather hard cup, you can apply transfer. So let's talk about newsprint transfers. They give you a lot of freedom if you're a drawer or a painter, or if 2D really speaks to you working in 2D. I really encourage you to do this. If you have kids, this would be a fun project because they could do the transfer and design it themselves, and you could maybe make the cup for them. So here's another transfer I have that's just some stripes. This is all just underglaze. So I work with Amico Velvet Underglaze. They have a few different series. They have some for low fire. The velvets have this really nice finish, and the colors don't really bleed out at cone 6. Some of them even actually go up to cone 10. So if you do a high fire, these work great. But Velvet Amico Underglaze, it's a great company. And I also have these little squeeze bottles that have a nice cap that keeps them from clogging. And these can give you a little bit more precision in your design. But essentially, we are just applying color to this newsprint, and then we will transfer it onto the cup with a little bit of moisture that's provided by the slip. So to begin, let me know if you have any questions about this process. Just go ahead and throw them out in the chat. So this is a great way to add color to your pieces. It's approachable using slips and underglazes. And so here is my template for the newsprint transfer. You can see it's slightly larger, slightly longer, I should say, than my actual cup. And I've just accounted for that extra length there, because when you transfer the cup and you're making it, it stretches out a little bit, and this gives you a little bit more room to decide where to overlap that transfer and where to make that last connection point. So just make it slightly longer, and slightly taller too. You can always clean that up. So working with a template, basically, to create the design, you're going to work from foreground to background. So unlike creating a painting where you would address the background first, you're going to kind of reverse that. So what goes on first is what you'll see, is what you'll see first on the cup. And so I like to do any outlining. If you have like an kind of an elaborate drawing, you can do all your outlining in like a nice dark color. You could use a bottle like this. There's great bottles on Amazon you can get, maybe with like a 16 or an 18 gauge needle, and that works well for fine detail. But the first thing you're going to do is apply an underglaze pattern. And so I have stripes here, and these are all underglazes, and I applied the green with a bottle, and I applied the pink here with a paintbrush. It doesn't need to be super thick. Oh yeah, the colored slip. Yes, I will get to that in just a moment. It doesn't need to be super thick. It just needs to be a thin layer of underglaze. And I used a paintbrush to paint the red. If you look up Katie Miller, she actually, I went to high school with her in Fargo, North Dakota. I'll type her name in the chat there. She's an amazing artist who works primarily in slip transfers, and she makes these beautiful patterns of like swans and ducks and foliage and flowers, and they're really incredible. So you can even go so far as to using a light box and transferring an image you design like on the computer. I like to freehand them because I like my work to have this spontaneity and kind of playfulness. It's really important to me. So here's another transfer. I just added some leaves and with my bottle here, and I'm going to go in and add some tomatoes. And that will be my second layer. So I'll show you that. And then my third layer, which will be the background, will be slip. So the final layer on your newsprint transfer will always be slip. The first, second, third layer can either be underglaze or slip, but it is important that the final layer is slip. And what's nice about these transfers is if you're using underglaze on your first layer, you can store these indefinitely. So I can have like 30 of these made, and then when I'm ready to print, I'll just apply the slip and they'll be ready to go. So the first layer can store as long as you want, and it's really nice for planning these out. So my let's go on to slip. So if anyone has any questions about that, let me know, and then we'll kind of design one in real time here after we make some slip. All right, so for making slip, let me clean up my workstation real quick. All right, for making slip, it's nice to have a scale, a digital scale. You don't have to have it. You can kind of eyeball it. I like to use these little quarter pints or quarter quarts, or pints. It's a pint, sorry. Just from cash and carry or whatever store. Does dry slip not crack off newsprint template? Dry slip will kind of crack off your newsprint template. That's why I like to, like if you were gonna add some slip onto here, I would add maybe touches of slip, like little red circles here for tomatoes. And it won't crack off, but if you put it on the whole newsprint, it will begin to crack off if you let it get dry, and it will actually start to like curl in. So when you use slip, you want to be transferring that day. You don't want the slip to be drying out all the way. That's why that's why when you're storing them, I only store transfers that just have underglaze, and specifically the velvet underglaze. It doesn't really warp. This one warped a tiny bit, but it's a little roughly, but nothing that will affect the printing. So just store your underglaze. And then when you're ready to work with slip, you want to keep it wet, and we'll talk about that wetness to print later. Great question. So slip, I like to store them in these little containers. So in here, I just put in some clay scraps, dry scraps from trimming. So whatever scraps you have laying around, if you don't have tiny scraps, if it's just like a big chunk of clay and you put it in here and submerge it in water, it's going to take a lot longer for it to break up. So if I were to use this clay, I would rip it into tiny pieces, or if it's dry, you can kind of smash it with a hammer. Just be mindful of those particles that'll come up. But you want small pieces. That's why trimmings work so well. You want to put them on your container, put your container on here, say it's empty. Weigh your dry materials. I've done this so much that I know 400 to 500 grams fit in here. So this is about 400 grams of dry material. And I put the dry material in there. If it's your first time, definitely weigh it. Submerge it in water and let it sit for 24 hours. And you'll get this nice kind of sludge. You know, it just looks like the clay and you're throwing water. And so now we're gonna sieve it to make it really nice and velvety and great to work with. So if you don't have a sieve, I definitely recommend one. This is a Talisman sieve with a mesh of 60. And so the higher you go, the finer it will be. And so I kind of like 60 for mixing slips. It's also good for sieving glazes too. And I use these containers because they fit so well in here. The Trader Joe's vegan mac and cheese also works really well because it's slightly taller, and so all your slip will fit in there because it's slightly taller than this pint one. So whatever containers you have that are kind of the same shape as your sieve will be great. So now all you need is a little rubber scraper or a squeegee. And you're just going to begin to put your slip, the water included, inside there. And it's pretty thick. I'm definitely going to need to add a lot of water. And I'm just pushing, I'm going to add some water here. I'm pushing that clay through the sieve. And the first time you do this, so if it's airtight like this, it'll take a long time to get through. If you kind of like knock one edge up, the clay will move through the sieve a lot faster. So just a tip. So you're just gonna sieve this, and it does take a few minutes. This clay is pretty thick, so I'm gonna add some more water. Kind of move that around a little. But you know, this could take like 10 to 15 minutes to sieve it, depending on the thickness. And I'm just pushing it through. And push it down there. I used some larger chunks too. They weren't like throwing scraps, so they're a little bit harder to push through. So the smaller the chunk of clay that you put in submerged water, the better. So now I've got kind of this nice consistency. It's gonna go through a little bit better. I'm gonna leave an air pocket so it can go through. And then it's getting kind of stuck on the bottom, but just help it come out. And you'll just go through different stages of this sieving and smoothing it with a hand blender. Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, a hand blender will work really well if you have one of those. Definitely do that. So you're gonna sieve it. Once I get all this through my sieve, I will sieve it again. So each additional time you put it through here, it will get even more silky. You can even do it 3 times. So I'm not going to waste any more time showing you this, but so there's my nice slip there at the bottom. Still looks a little chunky and needs to go through like 2 more times. So it is a little time consuming. You can also make slip or buy it from your local clay store. You can buy it dry and add your own water and mix it wet at your studio. I highly recommend that too if you don't want to use this process. I like this process because I'm using all my waste up, and I kind of like to have a zero waste studio. So that's our slip. So once you get your slip, I'm just going to pretend that this is, or maybe I have one that's not. Let's see here. No, I'll just pretend. So this went through the sieve 3 times, and this is 400 grams. Do you add color to the slip? I'm sorry, someone came to the door. I'm just about to add color. So I'm gonna put it on my scale and tare it. And I'll usually write on the lid with a little sticky note, 400 grams dry clay. So the ratio you want for color to clay, they're always talking about dry clay. So we're not considering any of the water here. The water is kind of the variable. You can add more water and have a really thin slip, or you can add less water and have a thicker slip. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it into grams and tare my scale to 0. And I just use these mason stains. You can buy them at your local pottery store or uspigments.com. Let me put that in the chat. Is a great website to buy them on, and they'll be much cheaper than at your clay store. So if you want to save some money, I would go through them. I'm sure Canada has a great company as well that I just don't know about. Sorry, I need a little water. All right, so I have a chartreuse stain, I have a robin's egg blue, and a praseodymium, so just a nice yellow. And whenever you're working with these, you want to wear a mask. You can wear a respirator or just a simple dust mask. My respirator is at my glazing lab, so I don't have it here. So I'll just be very careful and show you. So I don't like to keep them in these little bags. I like to put them in these containers so I can just scoop them out and it's a little bit safer. So I'm just gonna go ahead and make this robin's egg blue. And you'll notice that on US Pigments, it should tell you kind of the properties of what's in this, this material. And in my own practice, I've found that greens and pinks and reds are a little bit more difficult to achieve. It's not impossible. You just have to have a little bit of knowledge of glaze chemistry. Some of these pigments or mason stains don't work well with some materials like opacifiers such as zinc. So just do a little bit of research on it. Blues and yellows and that chartreuse work great. That dark teal that I showed you earlier works really well. But if you have any further questions on that, feel free to reach out to me or reach out to your local clay store. So I have 400 grams dry clay in here, and I recommend that you test all the percentages, but anywhere from like 4% up to 10%. Every color is going to be different. So you can just play around, but say, I know this light blue is, it works well at about like 6%. So 6% of 400 is 10% is 4, or 1% is 4 times 6, so 24 grams. So I'm going to add 24 grams of this blue robin's egg blue mason stain. So these are pretty expensive, relatively expensive. So just keep that in mind. And that's why it's really good to test too, because each of these colors has like a maximum vibrancy where, you know, so for pink, it could be, it's going to be higher, like 10% you're going to need to achieve maximum color. So 10% of your dry clay weight. So 10% of 400 would be 40 grams. So that's quite a bit of stain. But definitely test. I would do tests just from like 2%, 4%, 6%, and you can just do small 20-gram batches, or you know, maybe 50-gram batches, and see what kind of saturation you like. And sometimes, you know, maybe you don't want a total saturation. You want some pastels, so you're going to go with a 2%. So I'm just going to open this and add my color. So I want 6%. So let's see, that 6% of 400. I'm not sure if I did that right. 1% is 4, yeah, times 6, it's 24. So I'm just going to measure it on here, 24 grams. And my scale was tared to 0. All right, I have 24 grams on here. And now you can sieve it again. You can use a hand immersion blender, but I recommend you incorporate this color one way or another. Just simply adding it and then using it is not going to be sufficient. You need to put it through the sieve or grab a blender. But that's how you make colored slips. If anyone has any questions, let me know in the chat box. It's super simple. It's a great approachable way to add color to your work. And when you're working with slips, it's watered down clay. So you always want to add slips to leather hard pieces. And keep in mind that when you do add slips to your pieces, they are going to resaturate your work. So if you're working on like a handle and you just, or a mug with a handle and you just cover the whole mug in slip, and you know, I've even had like a handle fall off because it gets so saturated and heavy that it can't hold its shape anymore. So just a few things to keep in mind. It's going to resaturate your piece, so you want it to be leather hard. You want to be mindful of how you dry it. But they're really great for adding color on leather hard pieces. So that's how you make colored slip. There's a lot of fun colors. Just be sure to always test before you dive in 100%. And you can just do that with smaller batches. You could just make little test tiles, and once they're leather hard, just go ahead and dip them or paint it on one side. But definitely test those out. So we have a few more minutes left. Let me just show you a newsprint transfer from start to finish. So here's my template, and I really like stripes. So I'm just gonna do some fun, playful stripes. I'm gonna use my bottle here because I want these lines to be a little bit thinner. And I think I'll do like this chevron pattern. So kind of like a V. And I really like embracing the imperfections of this style, and just having fun. So much of this process is, so you have to measure everything out and you have to be so precise. And I like having this freedom that you know, makes me feel a little bit more playful. I don't know about you, but sometimes ceramics can be very, very hard sometimes, you know, so I just need something light. And these also look really fun too when they're not perfect, but you know, check out other people's newsprint transfers. Ceramic Arts Network is a great, let me type that in there. Yes, you could draw with pencil first onto the paper. I definitely recommend that too. If you have a tracing setup too, you can get a light table and put your drawing, you know, on top of it, and then put your tracing paper on top. Newsprint paper works great as tracing paper because you can kind of see through. But yeah, definitely draw your design out. That won't transfer. It will just transfer the underglaze and the slip. So awesome question. And I just put Ceramic Arts Network in the chat box. It's an amazing resource for potters. They're based in the US, and just get lost on that website. It's ceramicartsnetwork.com. There's so many informational videos from so many different artists. I highly recommend that. So I'm just finishing my transfer for the first layer at least. And I I'm gonna let this dry for a whole day. So I can't come back and use it till tomorrow. You could definitely like blow dry it, or if you have a heat gun, you could torch it and speed up that process. But I kind of like working slow and methodically and planning it out in my day. So here's a transfer that I have the first layer on, and I'm gonna add a second layer. So the tomatoes I'm gonna add are gonna kind of be hidden behind the leaves here, because the leaves are going to be on the foreground and they're gonna show up first. So anything applied after that is gonna show up behind them. So you can really do some fun things with depth and patterns and like layering designs on there. So I'm going to use my underglaze and just add some tomatoes. I just bought my seeds today for my garden, so I got really excited and I can't wait for it to get nice out. Got some tomatoes and spinach, some purple bell peppers. So these can be little cherry tomatoes. All right, and so this is 2 layers, but I can let these store indefinitely until I'm ready to use them. And when I'm ready to use them, they'll have dried for at least a day, and I will just apply some slip, which I'll show you here in just a moment. So I have my tomatoes on there. I mean, you could add up to, 10 layers. You could add as many layers as you want. This process is so fun. It's so forgiving. I would say the most difficult learning curve is just applying the transfer. So have some patience there, and but I'll give you some great tips and techniques for doing that. So I have my tomatoes on there. I'm going to wait for that to dry, and then tomorrow I'll probably apply that to my cup. So let me show you one that I have already. So this one's dry. I'm gonna apply some orange slip onto it because I want it to have an orange background. So the orange will show up wherever the newsprint is left. But the slip is crucial on the last step too, because it adheres to all the underglaze, and it's gonna pick up all that color and transfer it onto your cup. Or whatever shape you wanna do. So these transfers work really well for flat surfaces. You could do one on the plate and you would have a little bit of crinkle, which I'll show you, but they're a little bit more difficult to do on like a bowl, something bulbous, because you're gonna have, if you can imagine wrapping that newsprint around it, there's just gonna be it's gonna be a little bit more difficult to maneuver. So start off with a shape that's like a cylinder, slightly truncated cone works well too. But something kind of straight up and down or flat, just to begin with. So I'm going to clean my brush real quick. All right. And I have an orange slip here, which I added the Praseodymium, the yellow, with a little bit of tangerine. So customizing your colors is also really fun. Mixing and matching to make your own. Just be sure to test. And you can kind of see this consistency is perfect. It's nice and gloopy. It's kind of like a really thick cream, on the verge of being like a soft butter. So I'm just going to generously apply slip to the entirety of the transfer. And I want a nice, generous layer. And if you see that it's buckling a little, kind of coming up right here, as it dries, it's gonna kind of shrink in, though it will not dry completely because we're gonna transfer it, but just to let it dry the way we want it, you're just gonna pull it tight. I wanna get it out of the way here so we can transfer that other one. So I'm just gonna pull it tight there, and I got rid of those buckles. You can kind of see it's laying flat. And so this other one that I have, I believe I did this at 215. So let me show you what we're looking for. You can kind of see that nice satiny finish. It's almost like the top of a pudding, but it's got that nice pudding. It's still a little shiny, so I would probably want to wait a little bit more. But it will probably, you know, depending on the atmosphere in your studio, it will probably be anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours. I think they usually take around 45 minutes to dry. So definitely experiment with this. You can see that, or when you begin to transfer it, if it's too wet, it will smear your design. If it's too dry, it will transfer less of your design. But it's kind of easier to work with if it's a little on the dry side because you can rehydrate. If it's too wet and you put this on your piece, it's going to smear and you can't really go backwards from there. So the edges will begin to dry first. So when the slip does dry, it turns a lighter color. So if you start to see the edges turn that lighter color, you're probably a little bit beyond ready to print. So once again, just looking for that nice pudding top. I'm going to hit this with a blow dryer just for a few seconds to get it ready for us to print since we just have a few minutes left. So just pardon the noise. All right, so I can see this edge kind of curling up and getting a little dry. So I want to stop, but that sheen, that satiny sheen is still there. It's not shiny. So this is ready to print. And this will also just be some trial and error at the beginning for you. So maybe don't invest so wholly into your first one. Maybe just do something quick and fun and easy, and getting used to the process of applying it to your leather hard piece, getting used to the whole process. Just a tip. And maybe starting with something small, like a little small whiskey cup or something like that. So when I apply it onto my cup, I kind of want to think about where I'm going to put it. So this is my seam here. And I kind of want the seam of my transfer to match up with the seam of my cup. When you apply the transfers, you want to apply them halfway and then work in one direction to the seam and then the other direction. You want to work out all the air bubbles, and it kind of works when you work halfway and go to one edge. If you were to begin at this edge and go all the way over, you might get a little bit off. And so starting midpoint gives you a little bit more flexibility if it's not totally lined up. So I'm just gonna hold my cup, put my hand in the middle. My seam's over here, so my halfway point is right here. Just going to grab my transfer. It might be on the wet side, but we will see. So one more look at it. Nice and velvety, pudding-like. So we're looking for those visual cues. And I'm gonna line up the center of my transfer, and you can kind of grab your sponge if that works. I kind of use it just to line it up at the beginning. Okay. So line it up. Oh, line it up as best you can. Let's see here. And then once I get it on there, I'm going to kind of lift it up. And so this is halfway right here. And it's just kind of draping on. I'm not pressing it on all over. I'm going to work pretty slowly. And I'm using a soft rib. And my cup is leather hard. So it's not morphing at all. If your cup is not leather hard, it's going to morph, and the slip is going to resaturate your cup, and it's going to be a little bit softer. So be sure you're working with a leather hard piece. So I'm just working from the middle and outward, and I'm getting rid of all those air bubbles, and I'm just slowly compressing. Nice, deliberate strokes, not super hard, but I'm working gentle. I don't want to smear the transfer, so just be gentle but firm. There's a balance. And you really kind of want to focus on the top, getting that top all the way to the lip secure. When you take the transfer off, it tends to kind of not transfer as much on the lip. So I really like to go back and get that. All right, so I'm working from the middle, and you can kind of see the air bubbles through the transfer. If you can't, just do your best, just go slowly. And often the edges dry a lot faster than the whole piece. So I just grab a sponge and lightly saturate those edges. If they're not saturated all the way, they won't transfer, right? So if it's too dry, you're gonna get less of a transfer. If it's too wet, you're gonna get smearing. All right, and I'm gonna address the lip, address the foot. And the class will go over just like 5 more minutes. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for your patience. And I'm just working from the middle and outward. And so you can see this transfer was about that much longer than my template, and it was still just a hair short. So you can make that artistic decision if you like that break. That's great. If you don't want that break, make it a little bit longer even, and you can decide, you know, which side you want to overlap. So if you want this side or this side, And then it will be a complete image all the way around. All right, so really addressing that foot. Still a little dry looking there, so I'm gonna add my sponge. A little dry there too. All right. And up by the lip, actually, it looks a little dry. So you can kind of see it's a little bit lighter. I'm just gonna take my sponge and then take my rib. So now we're ready for the fun part. Could you tell me again how you got the plate shape for the plater mold again? So to get the plate shape for the plate mold, I just threw a plate, whatever is pleasing to you. I like something with a nice sloping curve. If you have too much flat space, it will tend to warp, but I threw a plate on the wheel. If you don't have a wheel, you could hand build a plate. You could buy a hump mold from your local play store and drape a slab over it. And then once it's leather hard, take it off and have a nice hump mold. But essentially you're making a custom hump mold. So you can buy these at the pottery store, but if you wanted to make your own, I think that's kind of special. So that's how you make it. Let me know if that made sense. Also, these are extremely fragile. I already lost a little bit on that one. So just be very careful in how you store these and how you place them on the table. All right, so we're ready to print. Take our transfer off. So you just want to kind of grab a corner and, oh, it was very dry. So I can show you. See how it's not really coming off? It just needs a little bit more moisture. And that's a better place to be than too wet, in my opinion. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of moisture over the whole print. And I probably hair dried it a little too much. I usually don't use the hair dryer. So I'm not really used to it, but just under these time constraints. But definitely if that ever happens to you, just grab a sponge and just go over that once more. So the colors I have down here are Amico Velvet Underglaze, the light red, which is a nice orangey red, is the first layer. And the second layer is that peacock blue teal color. So it's a nice, rich, dark blue. So let's try that again. I'm gonna take it off. Oh, it's still not wet enough. Really get those seams. It's usually just like that on the seams. It's a little bit easier to transfer once you get past that seam. All right, let's try that again. So now it's beginning to come off. And you can see there's some holes there that aren't transferring. If you like that look, go with it. If you don't, just fold it back over and push down a little bit harder, or not harder, but just go with your rib again. I'm gonna go down once more. So it's just a process where you're gonna really have to dial it in and figure out what timing works best for you. So once you find that sweet spot, just be sure to write it down or. All right, so now I'm going to begin to take it off. And I kind of like those natural places where it's coming off. And once again, if I need to stop, and fill in those holes, I can go back, but I kind of like the natural edges there. I'm just gonna put my hand on the inside of the cup and start going over. And I'm just slowly peeling it off. So you can see the bottom and the top are definitely where it likes to not transfer as well. And that's because those areas dry out first. And so they're drier, so less of the transfer. So just be sure to rehydrate those. I like that vintage antique look, so I'm gonna keep it. Try not to grab the cup with your hand because you'll smear it. And there's our transfer. So you can see at the beginning there, we had a little bit of holes, but overall it looks really great. And I'm really happy with this. I'm gonna let it set up. So probably just for time's sake, I'm gonna show you this now, but I would let this sit for like 10 minutes. So if I'm working in a series, I would do my next transfer. But take your roller. This step is very important. You want to roll over the design. So there's little pockets and maybe little bubbles. I'm not sure if you can see them, but you just want to take your roller and compress. Always compress. And when it's a little wet, it will kind of transfer on here. That's why I wait about 10 minutes. But you really want to compress the whole design. All right, and I was being really gentle when I did that. Could you tell me, oh wait, I already answered that. So if anyone has any last questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box. I hope you have fun experimenting with this process. Brings me a lot of joy. It's really fun to get these unique designs. And once again, I'm just compressing the entire image on. And I'll probably go compress for another minute or two to get all those bubbles off. And then I'll just let it dry slowly. You can dry your piece upside down if you want, if that lip is set up. You can cover it in I'll probably cover it in plastic for a day and let it dry slowly. But that's about it. If you have some spots where it's kind of flaking off, like at the top here, I don't have too many of them. Don't try and get them off when they're wet. You'll just smear it. Really wait till the next day. Cover it in plastic, and then tomorrow it'll be dry and it'll just come right off with your finger. You can really clean it up. But that's a newsprint transfer. Let me know if you have any questions. That's all I have today. I'm hoping to do thank you. I'm hoping to do a Zoom maybe next week after we all had some time to play around with these, and we can maybe do some show and tell. But yeah, I'll maybe send out an email next week, and we can get together and discuss all the new things we've tried. Thank you so much for reaching out. It's been a pleasure teaching you, and so sorry. The thrown plate, then make the plaster mold from the plate and late. Oh yeah, so basically you're gonna throw a plate on the wheel, let it get leather hard, and then you will, once it's leather hard, and you kind of want to throw an extra little wall up that's not part of the plate, but that will hold the plaster in. And you'll pour the plaster in, let it set for about 6 hours, and then take the leather hard clay off, and then let the mold set for about 4 weeks. And that will give you your plaster mold. And feel free to watch that recording too. If you missed anything, I will send that out in 48 hours. Just takes a bit of time to download. But thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I will reach out to you soon. But yeah, let me know if you have any other questions. See, maybe one. You're welcome. Yes, and I just saw that question in the Q&A, and you do apply the transfer to leather hard. All right, well, happy creating. I'm going to stick around just for another minute. If anyone has a question, feel free to turn on your voice or unmute yourself and feel free to ask any questions. Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Krista.
Oh, thank you.
Have to go.
Okay,
Thank
see you
you.
later.
It was
Thanks,
great.
Krista.
We'll be in touch. Yeah, see
Woo.
you soon. Thank you. That was a great workshop.
Awesome. Oh, thanks everyone.
Thanks, Krista.
Thank you. All right, we'll see everyone. I'll send out a Zoom link soon. Thank you so much. See you later.